if you do understand what your product is solving, it's much easier to position it on the market. It will reach your target audience.
So in this episode, I sit down with Alina. She's one of our senior designers here at Spring Studio. We cover things like how startups can start thinking about design early in the product lifecycle, her opinion on user personas and whether or not they're actually necessary, and lots more. This is a good one, and it gives you a glimpse into our team here at Spring Studio and how we're thinking about design and some of the things we like to share with our clients.
I've been in the field of UI/UX for the past 5 or 6 years already. My biggest passion is product design.
Tell me what a UI/UX designer does every day, why it's important, why we focus on it here at Spring Studio.
I would say that my biggest part of the work is create quite complex user flows.
All right. Awesome. Alina, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Super excited and thrilled to chat about design, specifically UX design, UI design, why it's important, why we focus on it here at Spring Studio, why startups should focus on it as well. So if you don't mind, maybe giving us just a really quick 15 to 30 second intro about yourself and about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the field of UI/UX for the past 5 or 6 years already. And I'm working mostly with UI/UX design for mobile and web apps. So it's a sphere of product design. And occasionally I also do website designs, but I feel like my biggest passion is product design. And here in Spring Studio, I'm working with a number of amazing startups, and would be glad to talk about it in more details during today's talk.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, just as an aside, I know we just started the podcast, but you say you get the opportunity to work with a bunch of amazing startups. Every single one of those startups that you've worked with has DM'd me, has talked to me directly and said, Alina is amazing. We love having her designing our product and just kind of leading those design efforts. So kudos to you. And
Thanks.
Great job. I guess that kind of segues nicely into my first question, which is, I come from a design background. I think a lot of folks watching this may also have a little bit of a design background. But for the folks that aren't super savvy with product design, UI/UX design, can you just briefly kind of tell me what a UI/UX designer does every day besides draw rectangles for a living?
Basically, I would say that my biggest part of the work is creating user flows, quite complex user flows, and creating them out of high level requirements, which are given by product owners or by the clients directly. So it's like the client gives you the idea of the functionality, what it should do. And it's like a starting point and the final point. And I design everything which goes in between. So how user gets from point A to point B. And when I'm saying design everything, I mean like I define each and every step of interaction. I choose the layout, what specifically the user will see on the screen. And then I choose what the style it will be if we are talking about building something from scratch, or understand how to utilize the already existing style and create this new bunch of screens to keep the consistency. So that's like taking a high level requirements and translating them into some user-friendly, frictionless experiences, so to say.
Yeah, no, that's very, very well said. I think design gets misunderstood in a lot of ways, especially product design, UI/UX design. I joked about just drawing rectangles all day. Like I feel like that's a very small part of it, but really kind of understanding who's going to be using this product and designing the most intuitive, delightful experience for that specific user, for that person, is really kind of at the core of what good design is, and especially what good product design is. So when you say like designing the user flows and designing everything from A to or designing the solution from A to B. Like maybe we can talk about that for a minute. We're talking about all of those edge cases, all of those little interactions. Like we think of a happy path versus edge case. Like the happy path, I always like to say is like the happy path gets you like your user is using the product exactly as intended with no issues, no challenges in between. But that is so rarely the case. So we must design all of those edge cases as well and make sure that the engineering team has those flows designed out as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that sometimes it's one of the most challenging, but at the same time, most interesting part of designing the flow. For sure, I'm always starting with a happy flow, but I have like a habit of not sending the deliverable until I make sure that I include at least a couple of edge cases which I can think about, and also ask the team what are the potential other edge cases. And here where the fun begins, because it's so important not to left the user with the feeling that, oh, something is wrong. Maybe it's something with me, or maybe that is your application is working bad. Like we need to strike this happy medium of not leaving the user questioning what's going on, but still give them directions of on how to go over this obstacle and go to that happy path.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and the same is about like it's a little bit like another topic, but the same is about this empty states when the user just starts using the app, and they for sure yet they don't know what is like the happy path, what they will reach at the end, and no one likes to stare at the completely blank screen. So like this empty space is like another part of small challenges of how to make experience already interesting on that stage already. I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a handful of products that I've noticed really kind of taking that empty state very seriously. Like I feel like maybe 5-6 years ago, it was like one of these things that you didn't really think about too much. It was just like blank empty state, maybe a quick little button to suggest like a user does something. But I've noticed like some products are getting really fun, like really kind of fun, friendly, and doing something interesting in these empty states. So kind of taking maybe a step back into your journey, into your kind of experience as a designer, what was one of your proudest or one of your favorite things that you've designed? It doesn't have to be something for Spring Studio. It could be something earlier in your career. Anything top of mind that you really loved?
It's funny thing because every time I'm delivering or finishing like the project, I think like, yeah, that's the one I'm proud. That's the one that should be first in my portfolio plan for me. That's it. And then the next project comes and like, no, that's the most, the best one. And it's funny because it's actually happening right now. I think that the project I've been working for like more than a year already within a Spring Studio, that's my so far most beloved baby out of all. Just for the context of our listeners and viewers, that it is like a tech startup, and they have quite a unique product. They're building so-called Copilot for tech architecture. So the end users will be CTOs and people who make decisions in terms of technological architecture. So it's aimed for a very specific niche of users. And in the nutshell, it is an AI driven platform. So it has all the features of this interesting for me as a designer app to work with. So it's AI driven. It has a very unique and demanding target audience. When I say demanding, I mean that CTOs, they work with apps each and every day. And if they choose your app to be a helping hand, it really should be like a top-notch app because they do know what good or bad UI UX is. So I would say that this project is one of those I'm proud of, and I can talk about for many hours. And it's already like shaping we did almost finalize like the design of the very first version of the project, and now we are polishing it or adding like more and more features, but it's already developed, and it's so pleasant to see how it turns out in real life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like the product, watching it from the sidelines, watching not only the designs and kind of the evolution of the product take shape, because like you said, you've been working on it for over a year. And like I think that speaks to the client as well. Like there's a very clear roadmap of features that we want to launch for the MVP, and then what features we're carrying over to version 1, what additional features are we going to add. So they have a very clear roadmap. They know they know what they're hoping to build, and I think along the way they're starting to get some feedback, starting to talk to real users, starting to understand like, okay, we came in with a bunch of assumptions, right? It's our core little team. There's a team of, I think there was maybe in the early days, maybe a team of 5 plus Spring Studio doing the design work. So like very core, like very tight knit group of folks bringing in their assumptions, bringing in their biases, bringing in all of their stuff. Like this is the product that we're looking to build. After you develop that MVP and start to have, you know, real people, the sophisticated buyers that you mentioned, the CTOs of these other companies coming in, those assumptions get stress tested, right? Those assumptions that we brought in, the biases that we brought in, get stress tested a little bit. And I think that's what's beautiful about building a product is like we have this awesome idea for a product. We're designing the right solutions, we're designing it for a specific user, and then those users come in and say, okay, you got this right, you got this right, you got this right, but I really disagree with this part and this part. Let's rethink that. So it's like taking a little bit of that feedback in and maybe changing course a little bit, maybe adjusting things. It's just part of the process, part of the product process.
Exactly. And I would say it's one of the most intriguing parts. So I'm always like anticipating the actual user feedback very much when I get the chance to work with the companies who do like this phase. And I would say that this particular startup we are talking about, they did like a very clever move in this direction because they are not inviting just user testers, just like a paid user testing, which is also a very nice approach in the UX world. But what they are doing is doing a so-called closed beta testing. And those people who are providing the feedback are those who are really interested in future adoption of this product. So I would say like dedicated testers who know what they're looking for in this particular product. And so their feedback every feedback is valuable, but there is like very interesting and valuable for me.
Sure. Yeah. Taking the sophisticated buyer. So we're already talking about a sophisticated buyer, the CTO of a 30-person startup, for example, using that sophisticated buyer, but also pairing them with a very deliberate beta where it's like, you came to us because you needed this problem solved. We believe we have the solution for that. Let's make sure that we do. And let's make sure that we're getting everything right. Because that one CTO of the 30-person startup is not going to be alone in the thinking that like there's probably hopefully thousands of other CTOs of 30-person startups that would look for that specific solution and want to adopt it in their organization if it matched what they were looking for. So yeah, that's great. You mentioned feedback. I agree. Like all feedback can be really helpful. What type of feedback as a designer and as somebody, as like a product owner, what type of feedback do you appreciate the most? Is it kind of structured, like I don't like this, but I do like this, or is it something else?
Yeah, I would say this type is very helpful because it's like straight to the point and it highlights the areas where you need to pay attention while polishing your work, and highlights this area in a very like bright way. So people are not liking this specifically. But also, the other type of feedback, which is we are getting, for example, right now within this project I'm talking about, is when people describe like what were their expectations when they first saw this button or that button. For example, we can talk about it later, but I had one assumption and it didn't work out because I thought that this button is very obvious. Everyone will understand what it does. And it was not like that because people were telling that we expect that this feature will do this, this, and this. And it's completely their original intention was that it will be doing completely different thing. Just to answer your question, the direct feedback is very nice of highlighting likes and dislikes, but also understanding what were people thinking when they first saw this or that layout, and what were their expectations from this or that functionality, or how they thought it would work. That's also very, very helpful because like the ideal thing for me is when there is minimum cognitive load for the user. So when they don't need to think like, is this button doing this or is it doing the other thing? When it's like straightforward for them. Because this cognitive load on each and every page, if it accumulates, then at the end of like using the product for one task, at the end of this task, yeah, it was a happy path, but the user came out tired and had a feeling that it's a difficult app to work with. We don't want this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Even if they make their way through the entire user journey that we laid out, if there's a ton of friction in between, and by friction it could be something like you said, like they just have additional cognitive load because they're trying to think like, okay, am I supposed to click on this button or I'm supposed to do it over here? It's like the whole I think it's super common in like profile versus settings, right? Like on a web app, for example, like am I able to change the settings of my personal profile in my profile section, or is that in the settings section? And that always gets me, right? Like when I'm using a product, it's not, and I think because there's no one like defined standard where I find myself kind of going back and forth between the two. It's like, okay, do I need to update my notifications on my profile, or do I need to update my notifications in the settings? Like I don't know. So I'm going to bounce back and forth. So I think that the products that kind of figure out how to create something intuitive where you don't have to kind of think through every step or like think through the two paths, because they're two very different paths. Am I going to click on my profile, or am I going to click on settings and then like try to find that notifications area? So yeah, adding that additional cognitive load, adding that additional friction can just make the product more frustrating to use, which you'll find people probably churning out over a shorter period of time because they're just like, this is too frustrating. Like I can't keep doing this every single time I use the product.
And it's funny when, because I had like an experience of a moderated user testing when I was like watching over the user, how they behave when exploring this or that prototype. It's funny when they did like this, all the steps which you wanted them to do. So it was like kind of a happy path, no frustration in terms of everything worked well. But when we ask them, would you use this app? They say, I can't understand why. No, like specific problem that I've encountered, but now I would not. It just felt hard to work with. And for me as a designer, it means that, okay, maybe we need to make it like less friction, or more user friendly, I would say.
Right. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit simpler to use, simpler to understand. Usually means stripping away certain features or stripping away certain experiences that I would imagine, stakeholders and owners of the company are just like, no, this is adding a ton of value to users by adding all of these bits of functionality, bits of features, only to realize after it's like, okay, well, nobody's going to be using these features in the first place, and it's just overcomplicating the whole experience. Let's strip it away.
Yes, I think almost everyone have the same experience when we open like one of some big apps, for example, like Jira. It's so powerful. It has so many tools and possibilities, but I every time I open it and I get a little bit overwhelmed. Then I overcome this and start doing the task I wanted to do there. And I do like their design and I do like the approaches they use. It's just that like the number of the features, uh, it gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
like
very
this thing can do literally everything that you need it to
oh,
do,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
you as a designer probably only going to need 5% of all of those features. So maybe you as a designer might not be the main user of a product like Jira, mostly like engineering and product managers and stuff like that. But you as a designer, like I think that kind of almost begs the question is like, should you as a designer have a slightly different type of experience inside of Jira where you don't need all the bells and whistles, you don't need everything that the engineering version might have, and now you're creating two different versions. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of on a tangent. I don't know if that's a good solution or a bad solution because you're essentially like you're stripping away tons of features, you're stripping away tons of stuff just for one specific use case, and then you kind of get into the question of like, why should this experience be a little bit different, and especially if you're going to be asking back and forth like, no, do you not see that button over there? It's like, no, my UI looks different because I'm a designer versus an engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the classic dilemma when it comes to understanding what features, for example, for emerging startups which only build their first version, like what features to include in the first version or what features not, and um, how it will be like for different roles. Will be just some functionality will be just grayed out and disabled, or some roles will completely not be able to see that the functionality exists because they don't have like permissions for that. There is like a very classic dilemma for me every time when it comes to managing different roles within application.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're alone in that thinking. I think it's like you said, a very classic dilemma. Speaking of that, do you personally like using like user personas when designing products?
No, not really. If we are talking about the classic ones, the ones where there is like a photo, a background, motivation of that
Yeah.
person, etc., not really. But what I definitely do is I need to understand our target audience who will be using the app, but I just try to find out this information in a little bit, maybe even simplified or a little bit different way. What I need to understand is like an overall category of our users, more or less like age group. Are we talking about junior adults or senior users? How tech savvy they are, and what are their expectations? These things are what matters the most to me. And instead of trying to come up with different set of personas and then book a call with the customer and go through each and every one to review it, it's much easier for me to book a call with our client and directly to talk through all of these things. And my user persona may be just like a list of bullet points, which is like a meeting notes after such a call. And I can return to this list of um, what describes who our target audience is and who will be our users. I can return to it later and just remind myself what are those expectations. And it really helps just to talk through the call with the founder or like the client representative to talk with them about that. Because very often, like, I mean, in our studio, we have a direct contact with the founders because they are coming directly to us. And in many, many cases, how they came up with an idea of the product, because at some point of their life, they were potential target audience themselves. They had some problem. They were searching for a solution on the market, but they couldn't find it. So they saw an opportunity and decided to make like a solution or a company based on that opportunity. So they can already tell me a lot of what were their expectations, and because they represent this target audience in some way. And the other type of customers which usually come to us are people who've been working in some sphere or area for a very long time, and they know all the pain points of this or that, for example, financial sphere. And they do know the pain points of the customers, so they can just tell you a lot about it, and you can learn from them during such call much more than if you will try to create these personas and write all these things out.
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful point. Most startups are being built around a target demographic. They're being built to solve a problem that a specific cohort of people have. They already know that. They're already familiar with the fact that we're building an AI co-pilot for CTOs to help with their technology architecture. Like they already know that. Like that, and that right there gives you so much information, so many things that we can kind of extrapolate from that. Like CTO, okay, we're talking about a CTO. This is a senior level person, super sophisticated buyer, super obviously tech savvy, like understanding, like really kind of understanding like what that just job title kind of means. That in and of itself is almost like a persona, but not really a persona, where it's like, this is a very broad persona, but I think keeping it broad can be helpful as well.
Correct. Yeah. And I feel like even if we use some templates to create those classic personas, it kind of saves the time, but it feels like a little bit limiting to me, because we created some imaginary 5 or 6 people, write out imaginary their motivations, etc. And it kind of narrows the focus instead of keeping it broad to the like most basic pillars of tech savviness, expectations, and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's a great point. It's a great point. All right, Alina does not like using personas. I like that.
Confession.
I like that. Kind of a contrary or a controversial opinion. What about, so we talked about Jira a little bit, and like designing a piece of software that is, has all the bells and whistles, that serves, a couple core groups of people, but really, really powerful stuff. Can you think of a piece of software that maybe you use daily, or maybe it's just you've used one time that you really love, and maybe why?
Yeah, for sure. There is like a bunch of such apps, and they are some of them are like my discoveries of 2023, and others I've been using for quite a long time. Like one of the fresh examples is the Arc browser, the one I'm using right now to enter this recording. I know that they use like a Chrome engine under the hood, but the way they design the overall user experience is incredible for me. I can't see myself going back to like a standard classic browsing experience. And the possibility to kind of group all your working areas, personal areas, all the bookmarks, links, um, music, Figma links, everything is grouped so that it facilitates and makes my working flow or just like browsing through the internet much more efficient and faster and more pleasant. And
yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I remember when they first came out, was it 2022? I was very skeptical. When it was like, why do we need another browser? Like, what are we trying to do here? We've got Safari, we've got Microsoft doing their thing with Edge, but we've got Chrome, and Chrome just kind of dominates the market. Why do we need another browser? And then I downloaded it. And the moment onboarding started, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It was just that onboarding journey from the initial download to actually setting it up and using it was so delightful and so exciting. It felt like back in the day opening an Apple laptop for the first time, right? Like opening the packaging, the whole experience was delightful. It was really, really intuitive, really nice. And then you start using the product and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. I get what all the hype is about.
Exactly. And I was also like quite skeptical in trying new browsing experience, but I remember we had like an internal call with one of our Spring Studio colleagues, and he was sharing his screen. I was like thinking, folders on the side with all his work projects nicely grouped. That sounds interesting. So yeah,
Yeah,
now
that's
I'm like an
different. That's
advocate.
different.
Yeah, I'm an advocate of this. And that's like one of my recent findings. And I would say one of classic examples I usually like to bring when we are talking about interesting UX patterns is our communication tool, Slack. I would say that the very, very latest UI update is still not got completely used to it, but nevertheless, like the core patterns they have, I do like them. And the overall UI UX approach, it's all about like the language they use, or for example, these, how to say, like Easter eggs or hidden gems, which are here and there in Slack. When, for example, you have a lot of new incoming messages and then you try to read through, and when like your inbox is empty, it's every time there is some emoji and nice saying and it feels like you've accomplished something. And the huddle feature,
The
yeah,
gamification
the
of it all. Yeah.
gamification and the
Yeah.
huddle feature, like this music, I know that many people, they like to be left alone in the huddle, because then when the music starts playing and they are looking, searching for this specific music, it made me even wonder like how Slack has written this music, what was the origin. So it made me look into the history of an app itself because of how well made it was.
Do they
And
have a Spotify playlist of all their hold music?
they should
They
they should
should. They
I
should.
assume.
Yeah.
I was surprised that originally it started as a gaming company. So they were developing a game, and there was a bunch of sounds which they created for that game. But it was never released and never used. But now it's used in the huddle,
And
and
now they're using it again. Another Slack Easter egg. I love that we're talking so much about Slack right now. It's kind of funny. I had no idea that Slack, the name, is actually an acronym.
mm,
Searchable log of all company knowledge. I had no idea.
nice,
I had no idea. And
nice,
I
yeah.
was talking to my wife about this, and I was like, I wonder if that was intentional or if they just kind of made it up. They found the name first. They're like, I really like this name, Slack. And then it's like, okay, how can we turn this into an acronym? Like, let's try to create this. Let's turn
Reverse
this into an
engineer.
acronym. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's nice.
Oh man, yeah, I agree. The Arc browser is wonderful. I mean, Slack, because we use it all day, every single day. It's like one of those tools that I've just become super familiar with and accustomed to. But I do agree, there are certain patterns, there are certain things within the UX that don't really work as well as I would have hoped. And maybe I'm just not a power user, or maybe I'm not a power enough user to like not know all of the shortcuts and not know all the fun stuff you can do. So yeah, there's some things that I look at. Like if I want to DM somebody, I have to click the little plus icon and then go up to message and then add the name. It just feels a little clunky. It feels a little weird. So I don't know. There's certain things that I'm sure they're thinking about internally and trying to get, trying to redesign the experience a little bit.
And it's also very interesting for me to compare my experience with an experience of other my friends who are working like also in IT industry, but they have a completely different experience. They are in love with the latest redesign so much. It's like this swiping feature when you swipe, like what is like what's new, and they're saying that this is a game changer for them, and they do love it. And because they are the kind of these power users, the use of all the shortcuts, so writing the messages and finding the information is super quick for them. So as you say, I'm also thinking like, yeah, maybe I'm not that power user, but okay, it does work for those people who use it on a daily basis. That's mean that the assumptions their UX team had, they are partially true.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah. Maybe we just have to do a crash course on how to use Slack better or something, because I feel like I'm not taking full advantage of all the features and everything that it does. This has been a really, really awesome conversation. I do have one final question. I think I'm going to ask any of my guests. Any advice for startup founders that are maybe building or designing their first product? Like from your perspective, from a designer's perspective, what advice would you give startup founders that are doing the design themselves? Like what should they focus on? Maybe like 2 or 3 things that they should just focus on when they're first designing something, if they maybe don't have a ton of design experience.
I think one of the most important thing is to have a clear vision in terms of the overall structure and functionality which the app will have. And when I say this, I do understand that it's like not possible from the very beginning to know what you will end up with, like all the possible functions, etc. But it's very important to always keep this how to say, like a bird's eye view on the structure of your app, because having this clear map of how your architecture, how your UX is built is very important in terms of not creating unnecessary entry points to one of the same functionality, etc. And it's also understanding, like having the holistic picture. It's also very helpful when it comes to defining all these happy paths and what is like the core functionality, what is additional functionality. And my main point being that the main focus should also always be on this core functionality. It's so easy to get carried away with designing like some additional thing which is interesting, which will bring value to the user, but it might not get even discovered by the users because of like faulty core functionality. And keeping this laser focus on designing the core things and understanding what the core is and what is like the additional, it takes like some, I assume, practice and time, or maybe even a path of success and errors, but that is very, very important. And as you mentioned, like here we are working with many startups, and when we have a chance to work with the founders who have this laser focus in their mind of what they need, what are the core functions which they need in the very first version of the product, it helps so much, because even I as a designer can spend time on prettifying the settings page, but no, we don't need the settings to be that pretty. We need the core functionality, dedicate more time on it. And it's also always very good when all the team knows what is our primary focus. Yeah, that's the thing. I just personally feel that it's much easier even to work in a company with such founders. And yeah, maybe the other part is just to try to be like in the user's shoes and to see if like to remove this personal attachment. It's also very, very hard, even for me as a designer, but not to be afraid to understand that some of your assumptions might be wrong, and to go through this flow as the user and to see where the potential friction points are.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great advice. I love both of those points. I think point number one is just so on the money. It's like we should be like if you're building a new product, if you have a small team, maybe you're working on your MVP, is like you should really have a very, very good idea of what this product is and the problem it solves. And like that is your core functionality is like, how are we solving this problem? And you're going to have a thousand ideas for additional ways, additional things that the user can do to accomplish something or to help solve the problem. But it's like at the core, what does that look like? What does it look like at the core? And how are you solving the problem at its essence? And then over time, you may be able to expand out and to add additional functionality. But nailing that core is so, so important. So important. So well said.
I believe this also helps the founders later with all their marketing and business development activity, because if you do understand what your product is solving, it's much, much easier to position it on the market in that way that it will be perceived correctly and that it will reach your target audience.
Great point. Great point. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Beautiful. Well, this has been so fun. If somebody wants to get in touch, where can they find you?
They can find me in a couple of places, LinkedIn, Alina, and also my personal portfolio with the same name. So I will be happy to talk. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Amazing. Well, Alina, thank you so much for taking the time. I'll let you get back to it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.
Thanks.